Okay, welcome everyone. Kate is going to kick us off.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Hazards Webinar Wednesday series. We are hosting this series during hurricane season, although the information is relevant to other hazards as well. Previously, we covered topics such as insurance basics for homeowners and preparedness tips for businesses. My name is Kate DeGennaro, and I am a planning specialist with Texas Sea Grant, which is part of the Texas A&M University system. I'm located in Brownsville, Texas, but I work throughout the Rio Grande Valley and along the southern portion of the Texas coast. My co-host for these webinars is Ashley Bennis, who is also a Texas Sea Grant planning specialist, and she works mostly in the Coastal Bend region. This series was born out of some conversations about becoming a first-time homeowner, how to determine your hazard risks, and how to find flood and wind insurance. We all know that that stuff can be pretty intimidating, so we've been partnering with a number of agencies to cover a variety of questions. The broad topic today will be building stronger and how to prepare your property before a disaster. So since 1980, the average number of billion-dollar disasters had been about 6 per year. Between 2016 and 2018, the average number jumped to 15 disasters per year. That's 15 disasters that cost at least $1 billion. One of the most effective ways to protect yourself and your community from these types of disasters is to implement resilient building codes. Communities as a whole would see a reduction in casualties, damages, the costs of rebuilding, business disruption, and the loss of incomes if they adopted stronger building codes. So 65% of communities across the entire US have not adopted modern building codes. A study conducted by the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety found that Texas scored poorly when evaluated on building code adoption and enforcement with respect to hurricanes. Our state received 34 out of 100 possible points in this study. Several other states in hurricane-prone regions also rated poorly. The National Institute of Building Sciences found that adopting international residential and building codes would generate a national benefit of $11 for every $1 spent. Considering the number of billion-dollar disasters we've been seeing in recent years, everyone could benefit from communities adopting stronger building codes. I'm not going to go on and on here, though, because we have a bunch of speakers who know more about building codes than I do. Before we get on with those speakers, I just want to say that this webinar is being recorded, and we will send out a YouTube link to all the attendees once we have it ready to go. We will also post the YouTube video on our social media. And now I will pass this over to my co-host, Ashley Bennis. She will launch a poll and then introduce all of our speakers. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. And then we're going to start with our first speaker today. Shirley Ellis is going to be speaking. I'm going to be playing a video of hers. She is on the ICC Board of Directors and also a building official from the city of Bastrop, and we'll be sharing some information with us. All right. Thank you, everyone, for voting. I'm going to end that for right now. So we have some good results. So I'm going to stop that. And then here we go. All right.
Good afternoon. I'm Shirley Ellis. I'm a certified building official, and I serve as the building official for the city of Bastrop, Texas. I also serve on the ICC Board of Directors as an elected director at large. Today, we're going to talk about building code resources for resilient Texas communities. ICC is an international nonprofit corporation established in America in 1994 and are headquartered in Washington, D.C. Our current membership is over 64,000, and that includes 8,574 government agency members. And with that comes 15,362 voting representatives, as each agency is allowed between 4 and 12 members, depending on population. Our core values: the ICC is the largest international association of building safety professionals and is the trusted source of model codes and standards. The ICC establishes the baseline for building safety globally. The ICC vision: creating safe, affordable, and sustainable buildings and communities. And our mission: to provide the codes, tools, and resources that members rely on, building safety professionals turn to, and manufacturers and the public trust. It was formed by 3 legacy code organizations: FOCA, ICBO, and SBCCI. And we have several founding members, including the National Association of Home Builders, the American Institute of Architects, the American Gas Association, the Building Owners and Managers Association, and the National Multi-Housing National Council. You can see on the side here a lot of the statistics that apply to us, such as our number of chapters, the number of standards and codes we publish, how many people we serve, how many subsidiaries, and the number of offices, among other things. We are a global family. International is in our name, and we fully live up to that. We have work or a presence in America, in Europe, in the Middle East, in Africa, and in the Asian Pacific. The I-codes are used in the U.S. by all 50 states, the District of Columbia, 4 of the 5 U.S. territories, numerous federal agencies, as listed: Architect of the Capitol, General Services Administration, the National Park Service, U.S. Forest Service, Departments of State, Defense, and Veterans Affairs. So the question is, where are they adopted? Well, here you can see several of our most popular codes. The International Building Code is in all 50 states and the District of Columbia. Fire Code is in use in 41 states and DC. The International Residential Code is in use in 49 states and the DC. The International Plumbing Code is in 37 states and the DC. The International Mechanical Code is in use in 46 states and the DC. The international codes are used in Puerto Rico, Guam, U.S. Virgin Islands, American Samoa, and the Northern Mariana Islands. Each state adopts and enforces building codes differently. So information on the codes, the additions, any amendments, changes, other information specific to state or local jurisdiction, then that state or jurisdiction must be contacted. The family of building of ICC is also has several building and community solutions that we offer. It truly is a family. Codes and standards, personnel training and certification, product evaluation and testing, accreditation services, codification administration services, engineering support, community resilience benchmarks, and third-party evaluation and plan review services. So here is our family. The Code Council, of course, evaluation service, accreditation service, general codes, SK Ghosh, NTA, community development solutions, Alliance for National Community Resilience, and the PEI. We have a learning center and we have an assessment center, both of which I will discuss in more details. Here's a list of all of our 15 model codes. And then the way those codes are developed, there is a development process, and the codes are adopted by federal, state, and local governments and typically enforced at the local level. Many governments look to the I codes as models to support consistency, limit development, and reduce costs. The I codes are developed under a public-private process with broad participation, including from federal agencies. And this shows the process from the idea of a code change and the proposal of that and submittal of that all the way through the access from the public to participate through the committee hearings, to then modify those proposed code changes through the public comment hearings, and then through implementation by online government voting, which is very important. If you are one of those 15,000 plus voting agents or voting members, then you can cast your vote even if you are not at the hearings through the online government consensus vote. And then at that point, a new code is published, new edition is published. So what municipal building codes does Texas adopt in state statute? So that would be at the state level. The following building codes are listed in statute. However, the building code adoption actually takes place at the local levels. Municipalities can adopt codes that are not listed in state statute, and they can amend those that are listed through an amendment process. To obtain information on local building code adoption amendments, then each municipality must be contacted directly. And even though they are incorporated as law, building codes are not reprinted within the statutes. Codes are adopted by reference, and that means that the law will name the code and its publisher, but you must access that code elsewhere, such as through the International Code Council. Texas Local Government Code adopts the International Building Code, the International Residential Code, the International Swimming Pool and Spa Code, and the National Electric Code, which is published outside the ICC process. The Texas Occupations Code adopts either the International Plumbing Code or the Uniform Plumbing Code, the International Mechanical Code or the Uniform Mechanical Code, and both the uniform codes are published outside the ICC process, and the International Fuel Gas Code. The Texas Health and Safety Code adopts the International Energy Conservation Code. And as I said, all of these are on the state level. So what are the current state of building codes in Texas municipalities? Prior to 2001, there were 9. In 2001, Texas legislature enacted laws to adopt the International Family of Codes and other building codes for the state. So cities that choose to adopt and enforce building codes normally be operating under the IRC for residential, the IBC for all construction other than single-family residential, the National Electrical Code for both residential and commercial, and the International Energy Conservation Code for residential and commercial. With regards to plumbing code, a city may be operating either under the plumbing revisions of the IRC and either the International Plumbing Code or the Uniform Code and the International Fuel Gas Codes. With regards to mechanical, it would be either the International Mechanical Code or the Uniform Plumbing Code. In 2019, they adopted the 2018 International Swimming Pool and Spa Code. And in 2021, House Bill 738 updated the 2000 IRC and the 2003 IBC in state statute to the minimum to be the 2012, which means you can do 2012, 2015, or 2018. This takes effect in January 1st of 2020. So the importance of strong building codes. According to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the average person spends nearly 90% of their life in buildings. This is why this is so important. And so current codes set minimum standards. They protect the building owner's investment. For a NIB study, it concluded that on the average, every $1 spent on mitigation at the federal level saves $11 in federal disaster relief funds. So current model codes, adopting them are very, very important. Updated model codes mean lower maintenance costs, such as lower energy and water bills, less mechanical noise, and overall higher quality for the consumers. And the process every 3 years is optimal to ensure that we use new technologies, materials, and methods, and that they can be incorporated into the next generation of buildings. So mitigation is highly cost effective. As I said, for every dollar we spend on average, we get $11 back. This slide breaks it down a little bit better into river time floods, hurricane surge, wind, earthquakes, and wildlife urban interface. What each one, that ratio is for each one, for you to get a better look of those that impact your community. Wildlife urban interface impacts mine. 2011, we had one of the largest fires in Texas and destroyed 16,000 homes in our community. So wildlife interface is very important to us. So codes update is a cycle, as you can see by Galveston, the one building built to current codes is still there. So it's new technology or a hazard mitigation, prompt code change. Then it goes into this industry adaptation period, at which point new technology or a hazard causes additional code changes. This is just a never-ending cycle. And that code change happens through this code development process. As I said before, access, update, implementation. Here's a little more detail that you can go into on the slide about how that process actually works. And I encourage everyone to become a full participant in this process. Our code development works because we have people who participate. Anyone can attend the hearings or listen to them on the web or view them later and follow along in your code development, the proposals. You can also serve on committee. The ICC seats about 350 plus volunteers each 3-year code cycle to do this code development. And it's very important to our industry to have this constant maintenance. So what's the current state of building codes in the counties? Well, as we said, the residential code, the local government code adopts it, is published, or the state requirement, which now is going to 2015, or the version adopted by the county seat for certain residential structures in unincorporated areas. It's only applicable if the county in question has adopted a resolution in order requiring it, and it meets certain other conditions, which are found in the local government code. Fire code, Texas Local Government Code, Chapter 233, also adopts the fire code for certain counties to enact, and that's counties with populations over 250,000 or more that are adjacent to counties with 250,000 or more. And that allows them to adopt fire code. And that's the code as it existed in 2005. Under this law, the county can choose uniform fire code or international fire code. Plumbing, state law requires any municipality with population over 5,000 requires a state licensed plumbing inspector. On-site sewage facilities, that's regulated by TCEQ. You can go there for information. Floodplain is operated by FEMA. You can go there for information. How do they adopt codes? A municipality must by state law adopt a building code by ordinance for it to be enforceable. So the new code is published. The municipality reviews the changes for applicability. Drafts proposed amendments. Amendments are reviewed by staff or a local committee. Public hearings are conducted, adopted into law by the city council, notification to contractors of adoption date and training. As I said before, they are incorporated by reference, and that means it provides the code and the name of the publisher, but you must access it elsewhere. Sample ordinances for code adoption are available in front of all ICC codes. Here's a sample of mine for the city of Bastrop with its preamble and then with the first 3 or 4 whereases. There's a full 18 pages because it provides details on each code as into not only the addition, but any appendix we're adopting or any amendments that have been added. So how do we enforce these codes? First, we start with licensed contractors. Please note, general contractors, there are no state or city requirements for general contractor licensing. Cities can require registration to provide insurance. Plumbing, it's through the Texas State Board of Plumbing Examiners. Here's a list of their licenses, their endorsements and registrations, and the endorsements for registrations. Mechanical, The air conditioning refrigeration contractors is through the Texas Department of Licensing. There's a contractor license, and there's 3 endorsements. Technician registration and certification and training program approval are all also found at TDLR. Electricians through the TDLR process. There, as you can see, many more electrical types of licenses. Also, there's business license for electrical. There's 3 business licenses, contractor license, and then approval of or licensing of the apprentice training program. Other than that, TDLR also has elimination of architectural barriers, code enforcement officers, elevator escalator safety, industrial housing and building, and mold accessors and remediators, also part of what affects our business. There's the Texas Board of Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors. The Texas Board of Architectural Examiners are also licenses that we need to be informed of. The Texas Commission on Environmental Quality has backflow prevention assembly testers, customer service inspectors, landscape irrigators, technicians and inspectors, and on-site sewage facilities, including septic tank licenses. So how do we, once we have licensed contractors, then the next step is to ensure that our inspectors meet all of the qualifications. There are state license for inspectors. Plumbing inspector is licensed by the Plumbing Inspectors Board, TCEQ. The customer service inspector, this is the inspection between the customer and the city to ensure that there is no cross connections. And then, of course, code enforcement officers. ICC certifications are also required by a majority of our Texas cities. ICC Assessment Center offers 285 exams, mostly through their Pronto, which is where you can take an exam anywhere, any place, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, as long as you're in a secured location. We offer 97 national exams, 31 state exams, 2 international exams, 169 contractor or trades exams, CLA assessment 3 exams, and UST AST 23 exams. It covers building, plumbing, electrical, fire, mechanical, energy, disaster response, floodplain, and of course, special inspections such as structural steel, concrete, and welding. All of the specific inspections that need to be required are covered in each separate I code in Chapter 1 under Scope and Administration. So we have several resources. ICC website, iccsafe.org, you can find them. Here I've given links to the most pertinent to our discussion today. One is a membership link. Free access, code access, and digital codes is where you can purchase codes for use by your organization. For your contractor or yourself, you can have free code access. No cutting and pasting on that, no search item, but you do have code access. Code adoption resources. Here you can get sample adoption ordinances, toolkits, links to who your government relation contact is for help with your local council or other for adoption. General code, which has a codification service, zoning maps, and customized local building codes. The Learning Center for training, and also the Assessment Center. Additional help is through the Building Codes Association of Texas. This is where you can network with your peers. What area are you having? How do you enforce this? Do you find it beneficial to amend this section in your climate zone, for example, or in your size city? The Texas Municipal League for legislative information, for updates on what the upcoming bills are in legislature or what ones have just been passed. BOAT is a member of Texas Municipal League, by the way. We also have building codes and federal programs that support implementation. One is the Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities. One is Community Development Block Grants, and one is the American Rescue/CARES Act. All of these federal programs we have links to through ICC Safe to take you directly to that resource. And so there's a lot of questions, I'm sure, in this very short presentation. We will have a question and answer session with myself and several of our boat members, board members and members. Here's my contact information. My email at work is the City of Bastrop, and my phone number, direct phone number, 512-332-8842. If you have any questions relating to anything I've talked about, you can contact me there. You can also contact me for ICC questions at slsicsafe.org. And this includes questions not just on what was covered here, but on any issues you have with the International Code Council, or questions you have, how to serve on committees, or any of that information on training, whatever. Just please email me and I will put you in touch with the right person if you forget or have lost one of our links in the program. With that, I look forward to answering your questions at the end of the program. Thank you very much for your attention.
All right, that was great. Before we move on to our next speakers with FEMA Region 6, I just want to remind everyone that there is a Q&A box. It should be at the bottom of your screen. You can start asking questions now if you see something in a presentation and you want to get an answer to that. Our panelists can start answering them, or we can ask them out loud during the Q&A. Lots of great information, and we're going to keep putting links and resources in the chat box so you can easily access them. Up next, we have a couple of speakers from FEMA Region 6, the Regional Flood Insurance Liaison, Gilbert Gueron, and Brian Bartley, who is a Hazard Mitigation Emergency Management Specialist, and they're going to be talking about a few topics. So.
Good morning. My name is Gilbert Gueron. I'm the Regional Flood Insurance for FEMA at a Region 6. My position title and description allows me to help people in our 5-state area when they have issues in regards to their flood insurance, either premiums being improperly rated or partial or whole denials for flood insurance claims, or any of the questions or concerns they may have. I'm the one that they contact for those type of questions. Today, I'm with my colleague, Brian. If I get you to introduce yourself, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Bartley. I'm also with FEMA Region 6. My job title with the region is Emergency Management Specialist. My area of specialty is Floodplain Management Compliance Specialist. And my assigned area is the East Texas area. I work with communities in the East Texas area to help them stay in good standing with the National Flood Insurance Program and correctly interpret and administer their ordinance.
Thank you, Brian. Well, the purpose of today is for us to have a conversation on what we call building codes and ordinances to discuss the differences and how they can impact you as insured or possibly those who may live in areas that are prone to flooding. So one of the things I would like to start off with is, Brian, in your assessment, what is the difference between a building code and an ordinance?
Well, a building code is generally referred to as a family of codes. The most common of those would be the International Code Council. They are probably the most widely used set of codes. And an ordinance is adopted by communities as a law, a local law. So a code gives you a description of the requirements for new construction within the community, and the community adopts that code and says, this is how we're going to do things. Whereas an ordinance is very similar, but it carries the added element of being a law that's adopted by the local community that must be followed. And I think also with regard to some states, they may have rules that prevent the use of or don't allow certain jurisdictions to adopt codes, but by adopting a law, they can adopt that local regulation that would make a requirement for new development.
Great. Let me also add that in order to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, a community signs an application and they agree to not only adopt, but also to enforce what we call a floodplain preventive ordinance. So as you can see, there's a big difference, and also to stay in the good graces or good standing of the NFIP, enforcing of that ordinance is very vital. Now, moving on, Brian, how can building codes strengthen buildings against specific perils? And in our world, we often are concerned about the peril of flooding. How can these help the homeowners?
Well, of course, a building code can, in a very detailed way, describe different types of buildings and the methods with which those buildings are constructed. Everything from the siding of the structure to how the foundation is built, how drainage is applied. There's a lot of things that building codes can describe and require for that development to make them more resilient. For instance, wind codes can require moment connections from the roof all the way down to the foundation that are capable of withstanding a certain magnitude of wind. Flood-related codes can require buildings to be elevated and built such that they will resist uplift and flotation. Just two examples.
That's outstanding. That's really good information to have. The cost of development of building that building is in the beginning. So having those higher standards or the construction method to make them more resilient is felt in the beginning, but it's often paid off over the lifetime of that home because of the resilient nature of that home. Now, let me move on to another question. Now, how does a citizen and community know where to find their ordinances, and how do they know if their community is a participating member of the National Flood Insurance Program?
Well, the first place I would look for the code of ordinances, or if there's building codes, would be with the community development department, or if you have a building official. If those departments are not recognizable within the community, I would contact perhaps the emergency management coordinator for the community or the county in which you reside, and start asking questions there. As far as the whether or not the community participates in the NFIP, the easiest thing to do to find that out is go into a common internet search engine and just input community status book. And then it'll take you to a site where your state will be listed. You can look for your community name. The state listings are within the state, the community listings are in alphabetical order. So just follow it through the alphabet until you come to your community name, and then look across. It'll tell you whether or not it's a participating community and when it went in to join the National Flood Insurance Program.
Okay. Well, one thing that surprises me, Brian, is oftentimes when people call me, and one of the questions I ask them is, have they spoken to their local floodplain administrator? Often I get that we have one. Do you know who it is? And I'm able to look it up for them. But what I would guide them to do is also contact their local administration and ask who the floodplain administrator is. When a community joins the National Flood Insurance Program and they agree to adopt and enforce that ordinance, they're also agreeing to identify a member of their administration who would act as the floodplain manager, floodplain administrator, whatever you want to call it, act as the liaison between the community's floodplain management program and FEMA. And they are often a wealth of knowledge and information, and they can guide citizens to the answers for questions they may have, especially when it comes to new construction builds, to make sure that it's compliant with all floodplain management regulations, and just to ensure that it's a more resilient and a robust structure for flooding. Well, go ahead, sir. I was
just going to say that's a good point you bring up, Gil. Every community that's in the program has to appoint that floodplain administrator. So if you see your community as participating, you know that you do have a floodplain administrator within your community. So you would be looking for that person.
Well, that leads us directly to the next question. If someone does know that their community is a participating member, is there a way for that citizen to be able to get involved with the planning process or discussions on how the community is making ordinances or changes, amendments to the ordinances to make the community more resilient?
Well, that's an interesting question. As a matter of fact, just today I'm working on map updates for some communities here in Texas. And of course, the map update process has a series of public meetings and comment periods and hearings and this sort of thing. So if as a citizen, if you're interested in the regulations, the ordinance, or what map your community is using and how do they look at risk and so forth, you would want to be sure and keep an eye out for public meetings, open houses, and your governing jurisdictional body, such as whether it's a council or county commissioners or police jury members, depending on what state you're in. When they have their meetings, they often discuss building codes and flood resiliency. If you're in a area with catastrophic exposure from maybe hurricanes or maybe windstorms or whatever the peril is, those jurisdictional governing bodies will often be taking those topics up in their public meetings. So I would encourage you to get involved.
Outstanding. Well, one thing I'd like to add on that is that if they are a participating community, I often see, unfortunately, that communities sometimes don't update their ordinances with new amendments or new criteria. Unfortunately, in my experiences with FEMA, I have seen some ordinances that were originally signed back in the late 70s, and very few updates have happened, if any. By the community members reading their ordinances and understanding what is required, they can also guide their elected leadership to make changes that will reflect today's ground truth and information. We understand that sometimes administrations just fall behind and there's other ordinances that may be deemed a little bit more important. But by understanding the ordinance that is in place for your community, you have a very big voice in guiding changes, and that can help your community become more resilient. Now, that's going to lead us into this the next question. When I talk about more resilient, is there something that a community can do that go above and beyond FEMA minimum regulations?
Well, one thing that I think is very, very important is the promotion of flood insurance for the transference of the financial risk of flooding. And for that matter, other forms of insurance, closing that insurance gap, making sure that people have that resource available to them should something happen. And also, whatever your risks are in the community, having a good safety outreach program, making sure people know, when something happens, how to react, where to go for information, what to do in the case of an emergency. It is very important.
Okay, good. Well, let me add on one thing about the community adopting ordinance regulations. So see, FEMA provides maps, but we also provide a model ordinance, and this model ordinance is the same throughout the country. And let me be perfectly frank with you, is that the risk of flooding is different in everywhere in the country. So our flood risk in the Gulf Coast of Texas and Louisiana is going to be different from the flood risk in Utah and Wyoming. So by a community identifying that they may be at a higher risk, they could adopt higher standards. They could adopt such measures as freeboard, which is FEMA minimum criteria requires that new construction be built to at BFE or higher. While freeboard is the higher aspect of that. 1, 2, 3 feet of freeboard will offer a huge, not only a discount on flood insurance, but also peace of mind knowing that your home is protected. And let me go into a story here real quick, Brian. When I first got hired on by FEMA, I took phone calls. It didn't matter what the call was. I just took them all to help me learn and understand my position at FEMA. And I took a phone call from a gentleman who was approved for a FEMA authorized grant. Now, this grant was for elevation. They're going to elevate his house 4 feet. And that was the BFE at that time was 4 feet. Well, the reason he called is because he has lived there most of his life, and he knew for a fact that his house wasn't going to be protected at 4 feet. So the question was, can we combine it with personal funds and elevate it even higher? Well, the answer to that question at the time was yes. He came up with additional funds and he elevated that an additional 5 feet. So it was 9 feet above the BFE, okay? And I got a call from him, actually an email after Hurricane Harvey made landfall. And he emailed me with the picture and he thanked me. And the picture was just mind-boggling. He goes, my house was dry. There was water 3 inches from his lowest floor. But he knew the true risk in that area. And he told me the only reason water got in was because people with boats doing water rescues were creating wakes, so water got in. But he knew the risk in his area, and he made additional decisions to make his house more resilient. So those type of factors can always happen. We encourage the community to adopt these higher standards so these citizens understand their risk, and also the citizens being informed themselves. Now that goes into my last question, Brian. Now, where can our insured, our citizens, the constituents for these administrations, where can they go to find out about their potential flood risk?
Well, before I answer that question, I just would make one minor addition to what you just said about the higher standards. There's actually almost like you're getting 2 credits for higher standards with regard to higher standards for flood risk reduction in a community. The NFIP underwriting methodologies do recognize building characteristics, so you can directly affect your rate by what you do with your structure. But also communities that adopt and enforce higher codes or ordinances in their code of ordinance for flood risk reduction can participate in a special program offered by the National Flood Insurance Program called Community Rating System. And through that program, they can get community-wide discounts. So for those people who are undertaking personal measures on their structure, they'll get both the community-wide discount and the discount on their structure for what they are doing. And so then now on to your next topic. There's a lot of places you can go to learn about the risk of flooding. I think you just pointed one out. If you know there are people in the community that they're in a position where they would have information. If you know there are officials that have been there and they've seen events in the past, that's a wealth of knowledge. I would encourage you to look those people up and ask them, hey, here, I understand we've got some minimum requirements we have to meet, but hey, Mr. Emergency Management Coordinator, Mr. Fire Chief, Mr. Floodplain Administrator, what do you know about what I really face as a risk here? What can you tell me about the history of the community? I think that's an important resource that we often, we overlook that. We want to go to, media and other sources like that. And to me, it's that local knowledge, that experience that I think is probably the best source of information. And then of course you've got publications, you've got engineering publications, you've got FEMA's publications on flood risk and flood risk reduction. There's a lot of resources like that out there. And then each state will have a state NFIP coordinator's office. They'll have state specific information. So there's a lot of resources out there for that.
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, we also have technology on our side as well. We have transitioned over the years. Now, a lot of our capabilities are open to the general public, and they can be accessed by going, as you mentioned earlier, just a general search engine and looking up such as FEMA Map Service Center, which is Map Service Center is the official map keeping site for FEMA. They have all the flood maps there, even archived maps from years prior. You can go to the floodsmart.gov, really good information about flood insurance there. I can give you contact information for insurance agents in your area who will offer and write flood insurance policies. You can also go to base level engineering viewer. This is really important for communities who don't have detailed information, but do have special flood hazard areas that we call numbered A zones. Very difficult for those areas because they don't have BFEs identified. Well, the base level viewer, the base level engineering viewer provides an estimated BFE for those homes so the local community can actually adhere to ordinances and making sure that they're meeting at least to the BFE, or if they have higher standards, make them elevate 1, 2, 3 feet. Well, Brian, this has been a great discussion. Do you have any parting comments?
I would just say that I wouldn't be intimidated by any of this. It's, you know, it's fairly complicated subject, but there's lots of people out there in your community that are willing to help. And those, you know, those technologies you were just talking about, they're getting easier and easier to use as time goes by. I would say anyone who's interested in learning more should, should make that effort. And I think you'll find that your efforts are rewarded for, for doing it.
I agree with you there. And I think my last comments for this webinar will be understanding flood risk is difficult. Let me tell you that I do a lot of education, outreach, and training. And one of the questions I ask if you live in a special flood hazard area to raise your hand. And oftentimes I get 3, 4, maybe 5 people. Well, the answer to this question is everyone lives in a floodplain. It's just a question of your risk. The entire country is a floodplain. And as soon as you realize that and you understand that, it dawns on you that there is the potential to flood in areas that we call areas of minimal flooding. Let me bring something else to your attention. FEMA has a lot of flood maps out there. And on all those maps, we have flood zones identified, AE, VVE. But at no time will you ever find an area that says will not flood. The risk and the potential is there. If it rains, it can flood anywhere. With that, I would like to thank you for attending this webinar, and our contact information will be available at the conclusion. So thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Gilbert and Brian. That was chock full of really good information. And we put a lot of links in the chat box for you guys to explore at your own leisure. I do want to direct Brian and Gilbert to the Q&A chat box. We did get a question that came in, and maybe you have some answer or somewhere you can direct this individual to find some answers, and we can also address it in the Q&A session. So at this time, I'm going to have Ryan turn on his camera, and I'm going to let you share your screen so you can present.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm getting this all set up, so bear with me just one moment. There we go. Okay.
Looks good on my.
You can hear me okay?
Yep, you're coming in loud and clear.
Good deal. Oh. Well. That is wonderful. I clicked something and all my meeting notes just disappeared. So, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ryan Miller. I'm with the Texas General Land Office. Okay. And we have, I almost have this. Oh. Okay. All right, I'm a program manager with the Texas General Land Office. I've overseen several different programs related to disaster recovery stemming from Hurricane Harvey, and as of recently have started to develop a program for the resilient communities. I work within the Community Development Revitalization Division at the GLO, and our focus over the last several years has been previous disasters and assisting primarily with housing. Now, when you consider that Harvey caused over $125 billion in damage in the state of Texas, there was a significant response from the federal community to provide some assistance. HUD was able to provide $5.7 billion directly for the Hurricane Harvey recovery efforts. And as of recently, an unprecedented type of funding from HUD related to mitigation was issued to Texas to the tune of $4.3 billion. Additional Harvey assistance received from FEMA, total $4 billion, and that involved both the individual assistance and public assistance programs, as well as the Small Business Administration, and $367 million provided to small businesses across the state. Looking at the primary hazards we have in Texas, you're looking really at three. And I know my partners before have covered very well, but the importance and the understanding of the frequency of flooding in the state of Texas. And I think it was very well said previously by Brian that everybody is in the floodplain. Just because you may not be directly in the 100-year floodplain, you are always in a floodplain, and Hurricane Harvey really drove that point home, that areas that are not in a commonly considered floodplain are in fact very subject to flooding. Wind is the other significant hazard experienced by homeowners and communities in Texas. And this wind damage typically results in compromised roofs, and which allows for water intrusion into the home all the way through catastrophic failure of the structure. And then wildfire. As we get and see more expansive growth of our communities, there's a lot more of the wildland urban interface occurring, meaning that there's more homes being built out in areas that share high fuel loads from woods, trees, and everything that we find pretty when we want to move out to the outer communities. So as we have more of this interface, and if we have an unprecedented year like experienced in 2011, that can cause and put a lot of communities at risk. So these three hazards are imperative to keep in mind. Now, homeowner resilience is primarily considered through insurance, having a homeowner's policy, having a flood policy. Homeowners policies typically required by mortgage by a bank requires that homeowners maintain a homeowner insurance policy through the life of the mortgage. However, it can be tempting to save some money that once you pay off your home to either severely reduce or even cancel the homeowner policy altogether. And unfortunately, we see this all too often in areas that somebody's either lived in a home for an extended period of time, or they may have inherited a home from a family member and they failed to maintain a homeowner policy, putting them at significant risk of not being able to repair their home after a disaster or after a flood or wind incident or wildfire. Flood policy. Flood policies are typically required for homeowners that live in a floodplain. Now, we, the GLO, strongly encourages all homeowners to get a flood insurance policy, regardless of whether you live in a floodplain or not. And if you do not live in a floodplain, a flood policy for your home is much cheaper. And not all flooding is covered by homeowners policy. So we have been encouraging all homeowners to get a flood insurance policy, regardless of where they are located within or near a floodplain. And then it's important to build according to code. Although there may be areas of a jurisdiction or out in the county that is less regulated by building codes. The building code gives the rules, as explained by my colleagues before me, the importance of the building codes. But it is imperative that a homeowner take it upon themselves in an area that may not have the highest level of regulation, understand what the codes are and ensure that their contractor is building according to those codes. From a community resilience perspective, my colleagues before have explained very well the importance of the building codes, the reason to update, and also the importance of enforcing the building codes, floodplain management and the role that it plays in limiting and preventing or managing growth and construction within floodplains within a community. But then there's the community planning, the land use and zoning that occurs within a city or a county, but primarily the cities, as they have their community planners that look to plan the expansion and the community growth. Now, an interesting shift that is occurring is within the community planning, there is a lot more focus being placed on resilience. So with the increased focus, this is an exciting time, honestly. The focus on resilience is starting to gain momentum. And this just isn't coming from any single funding source from the federal government. This is coming from HUD with their most recent allocation of funds to Texas, the $4.3 billion, specifically for mitigation. This is an unprecedented source of funding that's never been provided before. Primarily, hazard mitigation funding has been a role that FEMA has played. And HUD is now contributing to the concept of resiliency and mitigation, understanding that it goes back to the old saying that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Because working before the disaster to plan for more resilience and stronger structures and stronger communities is known to save significant cost and minimize damage when a community experiences a disaster that also could involve flooding, wind, or wildfire. So HUD has joined the game and has a significant amount of funding to contribute to mitigation. FEMA has several of its programs that have contributed and support the resilient initiatives within communities, to include even a new program that has recently been released by FEMA, the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program. FEMA has really been putting out some good, not only programs and enhancing their programs, but is also contributing to this resilience focus. The American Planning Association is the professional organization for community planners, and they have as well recently started to incorporate and adopt resilient training and a resilient focus, since the community planners not just only focus on helping to develop the tax base within a community, but to also regulate the expansion and that could result in expansion into high-risk areas. So having this resiliency concept at the forefront as they go through their daily planning activities, this will help further institutionally build in these professional standards, that resiliency. And then the insurance industry, after the repetitive loss seen, especially the unprecedented hurricane season in 2017, it has become more and more difficult for the insurance companies and the financiers and the brokers and the bankers to continue funding repetitive loss. So there has been an enhanced focus on adjusting the risk ratings for homeowners. And this is all anticipated to translate into potential higher premiums if resilient standards are not considered. Now, as there are a lot of opportunities, as you can see here, from several federal organizations and just the overall shift to resilient community concepts, those in and of itself will have significant cost savings. And the more that communities start to adopt these resilient practices it will have significant cost savings for insurance for homeowners. Now, with the most recent mitigation funding for Texas, it's an acronym that's pretty hard to say, but the Community Development Block Grant for Mitigation from HUD totaled $4.3 billion for the state of Texas. The different shaded, the tan, or kind of the light orange and the dark orange, are the eligible counties within the state of Texas for this funding. There are several different programs the Texas General Land Office is managing specifically related to this funding source that tie into a variety of local, jurisdiction, and regional mitigation projects. A lot of these are more on the infrastructure side, but think of elevating roads, hardening structures and facilities, elevating water treatment plant apparatus, and several other flood mitigation type projects. There's also a significant amount of housing construction being factored in, as well as local jurisdiction hazard mitigation plan update and development. This is a program that's assisting local jurisdictions to either update or develop their hazard mitigation plan. And then the Resilient Communities Program, which I'm going to go into a little more detail here shortly. One interesting one I wanted to point out, thought was fairly interesting, was the alternative housing study. And the Texas General Land Office is conducting a program that looks at resilient homes and different building practices outside of the traditional construction practice of building is what we call a stick-built home, a home built with wood. And there are other materials and building styles that could be considered that are much more resilient against flooding, wind, and wildfire. A very interesting one being the 3D printed homes by this large contraption here that actually injects concrete into multiple layers, and it's just a gigantic 3D printer that prints homes. It's very exciting, but the General Land Office is looking into having some homes built with this technology and others to see how they stand up from a cost perspective and how they stand the test of future hazards such as wind, rain, and wildfire. Now, the Resilient Communities Program is a $100 million program that will focus on jurisdictions. So think of your cities, your counties, could even be councils of government, but mainly to focus on the city development and adoption of building codes that meet or exceed 2012. Floodplain, the development and adoption of flood damage prevention ordinances, so enhancing standards. Commonly, many jurisdictions only require within their floodplain ordinances, flood management ordinances, that the homes must be elevated to 1 foot over base flood elevation, the anticipated flood mark. Now, this is where we're encouraging them to double that. And that'll also open up other opportunities for other federal funding as well, if they have ordinances that meet these higher standards. The development and adoption of zoning ordinances and integrating comprehensive plans and hazard mitigation plans. These planning activities typically have happened in their own paths, and we're looking to use this program to help leverage the intersection of these two planning activities within communities to ensure that they're both in alignment and that the comprehensive plans, the city community growth and development plans, have considerations and understand the impact of the hazards in their area and to not inadvertently plan for vulnerable communities, vulnerable populations, and accidentally or inadvertently planning them into a location within the jurisdiction that is prone to hazards. So with that, the Texas General Land Office is continuing to manage several programs related to Hurricane Harvey to this day. We've currently built over 3,100 homes across the Harvey affected area. And with the new round of mitigation funds, There's going to be several programs and projects that are rolling out here over the next several months. And we are excited that we're getting to help and assist the Texas communities. And with that, thank y'all. And if there's any questions or when we move to Q&A, happy to answer.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. That was really informative. We've got a couple of questions coming in, but again, if you have more questions about anything that you've seen so far, please ask, or wait until the Q&A and we'll do that. I am going to move on to our last presentation. Let me do this first because I'm really bad at multitasking. Here we go. So we are going to hear from Alex Carey, who is a Fortified Market Development Manager at Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, and also Julie Shio-Woodard, who is the President and Chief Executive Officer for Smart Home America.
Hi, my name is Alex Carey. I am the Market Development Manager for the Fortified Program for the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, or IBHS. Julie Shio-Woodard, President and CEO of Smart Home America, will be following me in this presentation. But right now, I'm going to go ahead and tell you a little bit about IBHS. We are a nonprofit research organization funded by the insurance and reinsurance industry, and we have a research facility in Richburg, South Carolina, which you see here, where we are able to subject full-scale structures, both residential and commercial, to a multitude of hazards. We apply wind with the fan array that you see there in the background. We can duplicate up to 130 miles per hour winds on full-scale homes and businesses. We do a lot of research on hail and roofs, in addition to wind-driven rain and wildfire. The research that we do both here at the facility and out in the field is what helps to fuel our Fortified program, which I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about today. Where the rubber meets the road is where the research hits Fortified. So this is was a test in our inaugural test in our research facility. You'll see here, the house on the left was built to an inland international residential code of 2009. The house on the right had several really minor improvements that are a part of our Fortified program. Some of the elements there are things like the continuous load path, which is the roof tied to the walls and the walls to the foundation, which helped hold that house together, which the house on the left did not have. Most coastal codes, you'll see, that have those implemented. Right now, I'm going to show you another video, which is a high-level overview of the Fortified program, and then I'm going to dissect it a little bit for you.
Year after year, severe storms along the coast and far inland prove just how vulnerable homes, businesses, and communities are when it comes to natural disasters. To help prevent further destruction, the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, known as IBHS, created the Fortified programs. Specific design and construction standards give home and business owners options to better protect their buildings against hurricanes, hailstorms, low-level tornadoes, and severe thunderstorms. A strong quality control component ensures owners are getting the protection they deserve. There are several Fortified programs, all based on objective, science-based building techniques. This video focuses on the Fortified Home program, which addresses the natural hazard posing the biggest risk in a specific area. The construction standards can be used to build a new home or upgrade an existing home. Using data from more than 20 years of storm damage investigations in the field by IBHS and other experts, along with data from laboratory testing at the IBHS Research Center, Fortified Home provides a uniform set of superior building standards, standards that are stronger than most state building code requirements. Homeowners and builders work with Fortified Home evaluators throughout the construction or retrofitting process to make sure they achieve the desired level of disaster protection that best fits their budget. The roof, a home's first line of defense against Mother Nature, provides a comprehensive roof system designed to keep both wind and water out. A fortified roof features a wind-driven rain management system for advanced protection against water damage. It also provides superior wind uplift resistance by using ring shank nails, which provide double the strength of nails used on traditional homes. The silver level adds extra protection by strengthening building openings, such as windows and doors, to keep out wind, water, and flying debris. The gold level designation ensures the house is tied together and has what engineers call a continuous load path. This means the roof is tied to the walls are tied to the floors, and the house is tied to the foundation. The continuous load path helps the home to stand strong when high winds try to tear it apart. After a certified third-party evaluator verifies all upgrades and critical construction details are complete, homeowners receive a designation certificate with a unique ID number that is valid for 5 years. Fortified Home provides cost-effective, consistent, and defined structural upgrades. These science-based construction practices reduce the risk of damage from extreme weather events and deliver meaningful value to homeowners. That is why Fortified has been endorsed by local, state, and federal government agencies and is being adopted by builders and contractors at all price points. For a complete description of Fortified Home benefits and requirements, visit disastersafety.org/fortified. Fortified works. It truly is the national standard for resilient construction.
So I'm going to talk for just a moment about eligible dwellings. The new or existing homes can qualify for a fortified designation. You'll see single-family, multi-units that are constructed under the International Residential Code, manufactured homes, and townhouses. Properties that are not eligible would be mixed-use structures, as well as commercial buildings, which would all fall under our fortified commercial program. Also, multi-unit residential, such as condominiums or apartment buildings, would also fall under fortified commercial. As you'll see, we have a number of designations for fortified across the country, with the bulk of the designations being in coastal Alabama. We do have almost 30,000 homes now designated nationally. And you'll notice that Texas is hanging in there at 18, but we'd love to see more Texans taking advantage of the fortified program. So this is another test that we did in our research facility. You'll see here, this is a full-scale duplex that we constructed. Everything is identical on both sides of the structure, with the exception of there is what we call a sealed roof deck, which is starting to be disclosed here on the left-hand side. That sealed roof deck is only on the left side of the structure. The right has no sealed roof deck, is built to traditional means. Now we are dumping 8 inches of rain an hour on this structure to see what happens. You'll notice the side on the left with the seams is actually performing quite well. On the side on the right, this is what's happening underneath. The water's coming in the seams. About 60% of the water that hits the roof actually comes through the cracks once the roof cover is blocked. The side on the left with the seams keeps 95% of that water out of the structure. So here you'll see the water's saturating all the insulation, drywall, light fixtures. What happened shortly after we stopped the test was all of that came crashing down into the structure, all of that soggy material. So this side would not be livable for quite some time after a storm event. The side on the left, however, was completely dry and, more important, livable. You'll see a little bit of insulation there in the ground, which happened when they pulled the attic hatch down. But someone would be able to come home from evacuation and stay in that side. We did a damage estimate after that test, and you'll see that the side on the left with the sealed roof deck, the damage estimate was essentially the cost to put the roof back on. The side on the right was almost $20,000, or 3 times the other side. And that person that does not include any of the cost for being displaced. That's strictly the cost to put it back together. Give one more overview of the fortified program here. Fortified roof, which is the entry level, can be done to new and existing homes whenever you're re-roofing, is keeping the roof on and the water out with the sealed roof deck, as well as some other methods such as using ring shank nails to keep the deck in place, and a high rated roof cover. In silver, again, we're strengthening all of the openings to keep the wind pressures out and keep the porch and carport intact, or porch or carport intact. And on the gold level, again, is the continuous load path, which keeps the roof tied to the walls and the walls to the foundation. Each of these levels, we're really paying attention to little details. There's not a lot of expense because much of it is very, very small detail and just documenting that process that those elements have been implemented. So for a new roof, for example, if you were re-roofing, nailing it down with ring shank nails, stripping the roof off and re-nailing it, then taping up those seams as you saw in the video, and then locking it in with a drip edge and high wind rated roof cover. The process itself, there's an application and evaluation process. We do have certified, fortified evaluators that work throughout the country that would come out and document the process. As you're doing a re-roof or constructing a new home, they would be documenting in the way of photographs and material information. And then at the end is when we actually issue, IBHS verifies that all of those, all of the program requirements have been met, and then we issue a designation. You may have heard that the designation in the video is good for 5 years. That's so that we can verify that there have not been any major modifications made to the house or any damage to the house that might affect its ability to perform in future events. Once that second inspection is done after the 5-year period, we reissue that designation, so it is renewable after that 5-year part. I mentioned documentation is critical. Things like the evaluator would be taking photos, collecting information on the materials, making sure it meets the standards, and then utilizing these compliance forms in conjunction with engineers and contractors. Be sure a home is not fortified unless you've actually received a certificate at the end of the process. So homeowners need to get the certificate. Insurers that may be insuring those homes need to make sure that they are getting the certificate to verify that that roof has been fortified. We do have trainings online at fortifiedwise.com. And with those, we have roofer certification trainings as well as certified evaluator trainings for those that qualify. And we also have 2 free courses, the Fortified Home Fundamentals and then a training preview for those that are interested in the training. They're broken down into modules and are self-paced and can be done at any time. I'm going to pass it off to Julie now and let her cover a bit about Smart Home.
Thank you, Alex. So Smart Home America, like IBHS, is a nonprofit entity. We are funded by various groups, many insurance companies. And our job is to do this, what we're doing today, bring you the information that is coming out of IBHS. So we either bring Alex along with us or we share the information that Alex shared with you. And then we explain why it functions in your community or it functions where you live. So for us, a smart home can handle the wind and the rising water. It's properly insured, it's energy efficient, and only then do we encourage it to be super smart and wired. We are funded by nonprofits and colleges, the feds, a bunch of different entities. And you're part of our stakeholder group where we reach out to you and educate you on many of the things that Alex shared. So today we're really talking about what are some things that you as a citizen or a community leader or official can do before the next natural disaster. So there was a code survey done, probably 5 or 6 years ago now, that shows where code is adopted along the coastal area. And I know that there's code inland too, but I'm going to focus on just the coast for a minute. And we saw that bear out after Harvey. So this is a slide from the FEMA MAT report, which is done after major CAT events. So Harvey would have triggered this mitigation assessment team to come to the ground and see what was going on. And we saw in Harvey where code worked, because code works. When it's enforced and it's followed, the structures do really well in really significant events. And that slide shows you the difference as the codes improved over time, because code does improve over time. A lot of what Alex spoke about today with the sealed roof deck is actually in the 2021 International Residential Code. And so a lot of those elements of Fortified will actually be in locally adopted and enforced code as communities move from whatever code they're at to the 2021. So the coastal communities in Texas, many of them are at 2018. And so a lot of the structures that were built did very, very well after Hurricane Harvey. But what was the missing link? So what we saw after Harvey and after so many of the disasters since 2017 was there was still roof loss and roof damage. And so if you think about code and the way that we traditionally construct things, if you're following code, it is very much life safety. It is to keep you safe, and it is to allow you to evacuate the property if something structurally is going on or there is a reason to evacuate. When you add Fortified to code, whatever code you're at, it brings in a property protection element because it's keeping the water out. And Alex spoke about that with the sealed roof deck. So the structure itself can hold together, but if you let water come pouring in through the roof, you still have property damage. And in a lot of cases, it's significant property damage. So many of the homes after Harvey did really well structurally. This is a Hurricane Michael post-storm. And you can see that the structures are doing really well, right? They all stood there, but do you see everything at the curb? It's because there was the weakness of the fact that the water came in through the roof. So you still have families displaced. So time and again since 2017, all of the assessments that are done on the ground after the hurricanes are showing where code works, where it's enforced, but not having that sealed roof deck or not having that retrofitted roof when it's redone is still letting a lot of water in and causing a lot of damage. And we've also seen over time, and there's a lot of research going into this by IBHS, is that when garage doors are lost, it's a damage amplifier. So you can have shutters on your windows and you can have a really great system on your roof. But if you lose that garage door in a high wind, high pressure event, low pressure event, that just amplifies the pressure within the home and it can actually pop off a roof or pop out a wall. We have cool videos about that on the IBHS website. The other thing that I want to make sure I get across to you today is that this is another Hurricane Michael, is that Fortified's affordable. Alex and I typically will say that over and over again. Fortified's affordable at every price point. You can see right here, these 5 roofs. So these are homes that did extremely well in a Cat 5 hurricane. And these are Habitat homes. The significance here is that that's an affordable home. And so it was built to what Habitat calls Habitat Strong, which is the Fortified program. And those homes did extremely well in that storm. So those homeowners were able to come back after evacuation and start recovering. The federal government recognizes Fortified as a means of resilient construction. It is called P804. It is referenced in FEMA's Coastal Construction Guide, and there is a tool for understanding that. We have all of this on our website, and we'll show you those links at the end of the presentation. So SBA will actually fund small businesses and homeowners 20% above the loan amount if they choose to go Fortified. And Texas put it in their action plan and in their guidance for all of the disaster money that was coming in after Harvey. And hopefully the mitigation money that's going to be coming down too will make homeowners eligible to be able to get to that Fortified standard. Also, the nonprofits that work in and around communities, and especially after disaster, Team Rubicon, Habitat for Humanity, and SBP, also recognize Fortified and implement it in their sunny day construction and as best as they can after disasters. And then I'm going to close this afternoon with, this is a scene of the homes and businesses that were designated, that were in the path of Hurricane Sally last year. So we had around 16,000 structures, 19 of which were small businesses that were either retrofitted, meaning they got re-roofed to the Fortified standard, or they were constructed new. So they were to those higher levels of Fortified Gold and Silver. These structures went through 8 hours of the eye wall, and they withstood severe winds and rain for longer than most hurricanes move. I mean, it was a 2 to 4 mile an hour path. So even when you have a significant hurricane, it moves through very quickly. This one did not. Right now, we're looking at 95% of the structures having 0 to no claims or very minor claims because of a tree or to other outbuildings or cars, but not to the actual structure that was fortified. No water intrusion. We're waiting on the final analysis of the data claims that we were able, that IBHS was able to get. But we're pretty confident it's going to be a serious success. And why do we have that many blue dots in Alabama? It's because our communities on the coast are all at IRC 2018, and they're all about to go to 2021. But they took one step further. The code officials came together and decided to make sure that they were at current code, but they also adopt a coastal construction code supplement as an amendment or appendix to what they enforce. And it gets all re-roofs and new construction to fortified. Now, homeowners still have to voluntarily get that third-party inspection, but from a community perspective, we are building a resilient community. These are our websites you can go to, smarthomeamerica.org, don'tgoof.org, and fortifiedhome.org. All of these websites will give you the information that we've shared today. And if you have any questions, you can email us at info@smarthomeamerica.org, or you can get to Alex and us because Sea Grant will get you to us. And then that is the Smart Home America toll-free number. And if you get to me, I'll get you to Alex. Or if you get to Sea Grant, you can get back to Alex or I. Both of us are very grateful for the opportunity to share information with you today. We know that you can't implement all of this right before this season. We're already in hurricane season. But if you are a homeowner that needs to re-roof, you can totally get that fortified roof done in Texas. It does not require code. It just requires you to get a roofer that's willing to do it. And if you need the information, Alex and I can send you a roofing checklist so that your roofer can get your roof to that level of fortified, and then we can help you get it designated. Thank you very much for your time today.
Okay, thank you so much, Alex and Julie. I've seen those videos quite a few times of the homes, and I never get tired of watching that and just realizing how much these standards can help homes to be more resilient. All right, at this time, I'm going to ask all of the panelists to please turn on their videos. Thank you. And just to reiterate, just to kind of remind you, we have Shirley Ellis, who is on the ICC Board of Directors and a building official from the city of Bastrop. So a lot of great wealth of knowledge and experience there, as you saw from her presentation. We have Gilbert Guillaume and Brian Bartley from FEMA Region 6. And I see that they're answering questions in our Q&A, which I will bring up again. Thank you. We have Ryan Moeller from the Texas General Land Office, who shared a lot of programs coming through from GLO to help fund some of these things we're talking about. And then we have Julie Shido Woodard and Alex Carey from IBHS, and then Julie is from Smart Home America, and those videos that we just saw. And so we also have a couple of people who did not present but are here to answer any questions that we need. So I'm going to have Jim, would you please introduce yourself?
Let me unmute. Sorry about that. I'm Jim Oak. I'm building official with the city of Garland, Texas. I am also manage the disaster response team for the Building Officials Association of Texas. So as a team, we've responded probably, I don't know, at least 20, somewhere over 20 disasters here in the last several years in Texas, anywhere from explosions, West Fertilizer Plant explosion, Hurricane Harvey, tornadoes and floods, and hail damage too. So, and wildfires. So we've done just about all of them. So we certainly have experience on what building codes do and what types of construction last better in those types of disasters.
Thanks, Jim. It's so great to have you here. We also have Celso Mata. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, my name is Celso Mata. I'm the Chief Building Official for the City of Plano, Texas, and I'm also a boat board member.
Thank you. And then we have Brett King. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Certainly, I'm Brett King. I'm the Chief Building Official for the City of Carrollton, Texas, and currently on the boat board as well.
Perfect. Okay, thanks everyone. So I'm going to start by just highlighting some of the questions in the Q&A box. I believe you should have a hand at the bottom of your screen. If you would like to raise your hand and ask a question out loud, we can certainly allow that to happen. But if you want to stay anonymous when you ask your questions, there's that option as well. So we had a question come in about, is it possible or easy to get flood insurance on a property, which is a great question. And we had a couple of answers from the FEMA reps. FEMA NFIP has eligibility requirements. If those are met, then buying flood insurance is as easy as calling your local agent and starting the process. And then flood insurance through the NFIP program is always available when a participating community of the NFIP. And I believe they shared a site or shared some resources as far as where you can go to look up if your community is participating in that. And if you guys have that, or if we want to re-put that up in the chat so people don't have to go searching for it, that would help. And then we had a question from Nicholas. Let's see. Okay. If we increase the elevation to 2 feet above BFE, what would we do with infill lots? Increasing those will create drainage issues to neighboring lots, especially in areas with minimum setbacks. Have you ran across this? And what has been done to mitigate the complaints and drainage issues? You can see the written answer, but I was wondering if Gilbert and or Brian would like to answer that live right now.
Yes, I wouldn't mind. But first, let me touch on one topic from the last question about eligibility. In order to be eligible for flood insurance, the community has to be a participating member of the NFIP. It's really important. As long as the community has joined the NFIP, as long as they have signed their application, the resolution, and the ordinance, and they have been accepted into the NFIP, regardless of what zone that structure in is. It could be in the X zone, it could be in the X shaded, the V zone, AE, AO, A99. No matter what zone it is, they are eligible to buy flood insurance. We hear a lot, unfortunately, that we have some insurance agents out there who are not as experienced, and they miscommunicate that they have to be inside the special flood hazard area. I would encourage someone who hears this to get a second quote. Not that you're shopping for price, because all of the flood insurance premiums are rated off of FEMA schedules, but you're looking for an agent who has knowledge and experience in writing flood insurance. Especially if an event happens, have an agent with experience will make a world of difference when you have to submit a claim. Now, moving on to the next question, I'm assuming that the person who asked us about infill is referring to fill that is being brought in to elevate structures. Now, one of the things that is in that ordinance is that we have to be mindful of adversely impacting surrounding structures and houses, and that's up to local floodplain administrators. But FEMA does allow fill to be brought in to elevate structures. One of the ways we can offset that is by determining the type of foundations to be used. I know slab on grade is really popular in Texas, but crawl space, piers, pilings on posts, something that will allow the unimpeded flow of water directly underneath will not redirect that water if you bring in fill. So it's just a question of the communities are willing to accept and pass ordinances to require certain types of foundations. But yes, this is a tough question to answer because according to FEMA's requirements, we do allow fill to be brought in to elevate structures.
I interpreted that question differently. I think that the person was asking about if the community is somewhat built out and then you have some lots that are vacant, maybe there was a building there and they demolished it and then they're going to build a new building and the new building will be elevated. How does, when the new building is elevated and the one next to it is not elevated, doesn't that create an adverse impact?
Well, that's up for the community to decide that. To you and I, more likely it would. But under the regulations that the community has adopted, it's allowable. So it's one of the things that the community considered higher standards.
Okay, so would it be, and Brian, I'm going to let you speak, would it be an option for a community, the council and stuff to adopt those higher standards so that doesn't happen? That's something that's within their control. Gilbert, yeah.
I'm sorry, say that question again.
So you said it's up to the community to adopt something like that. So that's something that the city council or something could meet and change if they saw an issue.
Well, it's already in the ordinance that the community needs to identify a floodplain administrator, floodplain manager. Their primary goal is to ensure the ordinance is being followed and to ensure that their community is kept reasonably safe from flooding. That is the catch-all right there. That could be used to help negate the differences in elevation between an older home that's in the area and a new lot. And you have to question why that lot was there. Was it a grant buyout for previous flooding? If there's restrictions. It can't be used for any type of development. It has to be used for green spaces. So there's some variables that are unknown there, but it is a possibility for adverse impact if they follow the letter of the ordinance. It's allowable.
And Brian, would you like to speak?
Well, yeah, just on kind of dovetail on what Gil was saying, the ordinance does already contain a provision that the standard ordinance that communities adopt for participation in the program to track the effects of development and to measure the cumulative effects. But what you're talking about with individual lots and in a very isolated situation, yeah, if you come in and you put 6 feet of fill on the lot next door, and the two lots on either side are going to be receiving deflected flooding, basically. And if there's a flow associated with that, they'll have the added effect of any erosion that would cause. And one way a community can address that is they can adopt higher standards within their local regulations to limit the use of fill. Maybe say, oh, well, you can only put fill in to the extent that it was in the original subdivision or something of that nature, or maybe limited to a height, or prohibit structural fill use altogether within certain areas of the community where risks are elevated and known to exist. So there's a lot of things you can do with your building codes and ordinances for that, to address that issue.
Okay, thank you. And I see you typing the answer, but we did have a question about when you think the GLO Resilient Communities Program might open up for applications.
Yes, that date has not been determined yet, as we're still building out the program, but is anticipated to be early 2022. But the best source for that information, as soon as we do get that confirmed and go public with that, it will be on our recovery.texas.gov website, and click on info for local government, and that is where we will be posting that information.
Okay, perfect. And let's see. So, and I'm not sure if anyone can answer this right now. So if you can, please pipe up. If not, I will reach out to Toya and get an answer. But does Toya give a discount for fortified roofs? Does anybody know that? Okay.
So last I knew, they did not give one specifically for fortified roofs. Currently in Texas, there's not a lot of insurance credits that we're aware of. However, there are some individual companies that I think are offering credits of some form. We just don't have a lot of that documented at this time.
Okay. And do you think there's, as you know, something that residents can do to reach out to either their elected officials to start that conversation? Is that something that kind of got going in? Because I know in Mississippi, Alabama, there are some credits, for being fortified.
Yeah, I think I may let Julie elaborate a little bit more on that. There is, I mean, currently it's more likely that we'll see more voluntary credits offered from companies than necessarily legislative action just yet, but I'll let Julie maybe speak to that if you have any thoughts on those along those lines, Julie.
So there are individual companies. There's a handful that recognize Fortified, and there are one or two of the larger insurance companies that most people are familiar with that recognize it. Toya is actively working in evaluating how they want to incorporate Fortified moving forward for their policyholders and what that looks like. And if they go forward with that, because of the way that Toya is structured, it will require some sort of a legislative process. And so that is moving forward, and they're pulling in all their research and figuring out how that best looks for their policyholders. From a local perspective, right now we're extremely familiar with the coast because we were there after Harvey, working with local communities to see how they could implement Fortified moving forward. And for those that are at the more recent building code, so that 2018, and for those that actually moved to 2021, it would be very, very easy for them to bring that Fortified in. With the 2021, it's pretty much there as long as they're requiring engineering for load path for plans, and that's part of that permitting process. And so it would not be a huge leap for a homeowner to get to that Fortified designation. And then Kate's done a great job of putting links in the chat for how to find a Fortified evaluator, how to get to the specs, how to get to the roofing checklist, how to understand what Fortified is. So a community in Texas that gets to 2021, and honestly, we've not actually walked this path yet, because 2021 is going to change a lot for us. It'll be much easier for communities to get their community to Fortified. So we're not even sure if it would be necessary for that coastal construction supplement, as long as they are calling out that sealed roof deck and they're educating their citizens on bringing in a Fortified evaluator in a voluntary status into that conversation when they're working with a contractor, builder, developer, or roofer. But yes, especially on the coast in Texas, most of them are at 2018. And so it's very easy for the homeowner to get to Fortified with very minimal increase in cost. And there are a handful of insurers that will recognize and write that, so that homeowner could get out of Toya and get a good insurance policy, because by law, Toya's policies cannot be competitive to the private insurance market. So you get a policy that gets you as much coverage as possible, but the private market would be able to cover you more comprehensively.
Yeah,
I hope that answered that. I went around the
seen
world.
Yeah, we've definitely seen examples of that where companies that would not normally write insurance, for example, in the coast and in Rockport, have written a Fortified home. So that's definitely happening.
I think the important thing also to point out is that since 2017, the insurance market has begun to harden, and in the 24 months, it has significantly hardened, meaning that homeowners are now receiving drop notices where they're losing coverage, or they're receiving notices saying that if they don't re-roof in the next 14 or 30 days, they're going to lose coverage, or their coverage is going to go from an actual cash value to a replacement. They're going to go from replacement value to actual cash value on renewal. So a lot of homeowners now across the entire Gulf of Mexico are starting to feel that as the insurance market is hardening. It's also going to put more people in the wind pool, because most of the companies now are no longer writing policies in the higher risk areas of the Gulf of Mexico. So they're starting to balance out how many high risk policies they're taking on. And so for us, Fortified is a way for those homeowners to become competitive, to get a good insurance policy, and to also, for new builds, depending on construction and where it's located, to just get good insurance. And this isn't going to go away. This is the hardened market is going to be with us for a bit.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And as you guys were talking, we got a question about if Fortified roofs are more hail resistant. Is that something that helps with?
Yeah, so we do have, I didn't get too into the nitty gritty of the Fortified program with this particular presentation, but we do have a Fortified high wind program, which would be applicable inland. And then we have what we call a hail supplement that can be attached to either the hurricane or the high wind program. And with that, we do, the main difference is that we require an impact rated shingle, and that would allow that to be more hail resistant. We actually had have done a study of impact rated shingles. They're not all created equal, and we have a rating actually for class 4 shingles on our website that basically tells consumers which shingles are more resilient and which are not, because we definitely found where there were some impact rated shingles that were not performing as they were intended. So that impact rating is really important if you're going to spend the money to buy an impact rated shingle, to make sure that it is, that we have our rating that goes above and beyond the class 4 rating that UL has. So important info if we're looking.
Yeah, great. And then yes, all of the links we put in will certainly tell you more in-depth information. And feel free to please reach out to Alex and Julie with more questions. So I do want to kind of loop in the Building Officials Association Texas team here. So I know we're going to have you on for our second webinar. We're going to do another webinar where we're going to talk about what to do after a disaster. A lot of some of this stuff is stuff you can implement before a disaster, stronger building codes to help your communities. So after a disaster, if a homeowner needs a damage assessment to try and figure out what's going on and what they need to do, where do they reach out to find that information?
Well, there's a couple of things that happen following a disaster. Normally, there is a rapid safety evaluation that has been conducted that determines what's going on. How many homes are damaged, how many are affected, minor, major, and destroyed. And then that information is part of the local government's history. But your local government, whoever that is, whether it's county or city, if you've got damage, those are the first people you reach out to say, what do I need to do? Can I move back into this house? As we've talked about, is the home habitable to a point where I can do that till repairs can be made? So, but the local, the municipal government or the county government are the ones that make that determination whether or not those homes can be reoccupied or just re-entered at that point. But it is up to the local jurisdiction, normally the building official, that'll make those calls.
Okay. And can people be trained or seek out training to do some damage assessment to help their community? Because after a disaster, there's so much need that getting more people trained or prepared to do that, I would feel like that's very important. Is that something that you guys offer or can do?
Well, actually, the Building Official Association, part of our big goal is to get more and more folks trained. We do partner with the architects and structural engineers to put together teams that go out and do those rapid safety evaluations. Those rapid safety evaluations, generally through FEMA, there are specific resource types that are generally required or desired to be used to do your post-disaster damage assessment. Those resource types have to have that base knowledge of how a building goes together, as we talked earlier about load paths, how those things together, how that building goes together, to be able to walk around the outside and say what's wrong with it and whether or not they think it's structurally safe to occupy. You got to have some base knowledge. So you can't just take, say a CERT volunteer or somebody like that and say, hey, we're going to teach you how to do post-disaster damage assessment. It does take somebody that's got some qualifications on the background, but through the Building Officials Association of Texas, we do put on a couple of different types of rapid safety evaluation training. We use the International Code Council when disaster strikes, which is approved through FEMA, and the Cal OES SAP program, Safety Assessment Program. We teach that one too, which is also approved by FEMA to do post-disaster damage assessment. Both of those do have generally pre-qualifications that you are an architect, an engineer, a building inspector certified. Some of the resource types are allowing some construction management capabilities. People that have been in construction for a long time, we're starting to see some of those come in, but primarily it's those folks that are in charge of design and inspection of that.
There's one more question in the Q&A box that.
Yeah, I was getting to that.
Okay.
Because I know who asked this. So there's some issues in some rural communities trying to, individual homeowners might try to seek and update their homes and stuff, but then they try to use FEMA mitigation grants and are told that, you know, the county has to apply or the community has to apply and they need to get them behind there. Is there any resources or an answer that we can provide for this individual about, you know, how can the Code Council work with county governments, especially in the rural areas of Texas, to apply for FEMA mitigation grants and adopt and enforce modern codes? I'm not sure who specifically might be able to answer this, but if we could provide more resources or somewhere to direct this person, it would be helpful, because I know this is an issue.
I'm afraid this is outside of my area of expertise, but they're more than welcome to send me an email and I can direct them to the people who would respond to grant initiated questions. Just one comment I have, the question was kind of vague just about county levels. We have to understand in Texas, counties are regulated about what they can permit and issue permits for. If it wasn't for the state enabling language, the counties wouldn't even be able to issue floodplain development permits. So that's something to keep in mind as well. They really can't adopt higher standards for building codes if they're not allowed to issue building codes to begin with. So, but please send me an email and I will forward that to our grant people. With the more in depth the question, the better the response will be.
Thank you, and I will provide those contact information at the end. We do have a question in the chat. Why are second homes excluded from mitigation grants for elevation, other ways to eliminate disaster damage? If community resilience is the goal, one of the most important factors is a loss of property tax base during recovery and rebuilding.
I could jump on this one a little bit, but not from the FEMA side. I'll speak to more from the HUD side. But as it relates to the recovery funds that we're managing, they are limited to primary residents. And that is where the federal assistance is focused from the HUD perspective. I would assume similar to FEMA, but Gilbert or Brian probably can cover that better.
Yeah, absolutely right. We have waiting lists of people who are waiting to have their houses elevated or mitigated, that this is their primary residence. So even though it may be unfair to some, our primary focus is to making sure people have a primary home in which to live in a safe manner.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Actually, I think Shirley was going to say. Oh, Ashley, I think Shirley was going to say something earlier.
Oh, I'm sorry, Shirley. Please go ahead.
I was going to expand on the building codes and ordinances in the county. The state has given some counties adoption power for residential building and also for the IBC. And it's very specific to what the county has to do to adopt that and to be able to adopt that. But that's the only two of the I codes that they have the power to use. And there's not that many counties yet that are doing that because they don't have the ability and the capability to create a building department.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. I know there's a lot of confusion about what cities and counties can do, and then there's the unincorporated areas too that are kind of just floating out there.
Yes, the only thing counties can do, as Gilbert said, is things that the state gives them authority to do. And so if they'll go back on in my slide packet, there's some references to state law in reference to counties specifically and the building and the residential code.
Perfect. Thank you. And we'll have that recording up as soon as we can, as soon as we compile everything together. I would like to thank our panelists and presenters so much for being here. Thank you so much. It was great information. We had a great turnout today. So spreading that information. I am going to share my screen and show all of the contact information for everyone. And once you close out of this webinar, a survey is going to pop up. It will take about 5 minutes, not even probably. Please do what you can to answer those. It really helps us to improve and do better and target our information to what our audience wants and needs. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you, everyone. And I hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.